Hello, LinkedIn community. My name is Sophia Marine. I'm a cybersecurity enthusiast and an incident responder. In today's demo, we're going to be covering the topic of how to manage and secure service principals. To begin this demo, we're going to sort the five objectives of the day. The first objective is going to be understand what service principal, how service principal interacts with Azure, the different types of service principals, how do you administrative access to a service principal, and why are service principals so relevant and how to secure them. So let's begin. One of the things that I want to show is that I'm going to be running the command live. So basically, this is an Azure PowerShell command, and there's a bunch of service principles and service principles that you, as a manager and administrator of your cloud, might not be even aware of, right? So this is the part that we're going to explain. Basically, what's a service principle? So a service principle is a placeholder at the identity level that will allow this service principal to communicate directly with Azure and the hosted services, automate tools, applications, and even impersonate. So basically, we're gonna put it here. So I have one option that I wanted to show. So, for example, this service principal that is called Cody Test is an actual application. Now, this application can impersonate a user, can have consents, can have roles. So this is where we start dividing the different types of service principal. As we know, service principal is what is used to access Azure, right? What is going to access Azure depends on the roles and consents, on the permissions it has. Basically, we have three types of service principal. An application that is the local representation on that domain. So there's going to be applications that are global. For example, that we have here, Azure, Azure. So as I was mentioning, one of those example is the one that we have here, the Azure Compute. So Azure Compute itself is globally. Every single tenant has it. Now, the service principal, that is the object ID, it's unique to my tenant. The application ID, on the other hand, it's global. So there's going to be certain first party applications like Azure CLI, Azure Portal that are documented, and these are global to anybody, right? These are application IDs that are defined globally. Now, inside your own tenant, you will have a logical representation locally of that same application. So that's the first type, right? The applications. The second type. So the second type of service principal is going to be a managed identity. So managed identities, the difference is that the first one, the application, like for example, Kali Test or Azure Compute, will require a way for us to manage the credentials. Manage its managed identities eliminates that need, right? It eliminates the need for developers to have credentials. We were not going to be basing of managed identities in today's video, but that's an overall perspective. And ultimately, it's legacy. So legacy, it's for legacy applications. This is still will be under the app registration in the Azure portal, and it will have credentials, service principal name, the URLs, and all the properties. Today's video is going to be centralized on the application type service principle. Now, now that we cover what's a service principle and the types, how do they interact with us? So the way that interacts, as we said, service principal is a placeholder. It's a placeholder for permissions and access level. Basically, it covers the authorization and authentication on that triple A perspective. And when it comes to accountability, that will be designing logs for you to go ahead and back in time where the service principal has login. As we usually use a service principal as an application for many automatic tasks that the user will not be aware. They will be able, if I want to show here one of them, I'm going to bring my portal. So over here, one of the main things is consents and permissions. So this is how it's going to interact. There's going to be certain level of consent. So me as a user, I consent whatever application to read my email, to even send email in behalf of myself. And me as an admin, I am I consenting the application, for example, to create new users or so. So at any time you want to publish an application, you have to create the consent settings. Let's say, what can I ask the user for? And part of the applications, for example, is that, okay, if the publisher is very fast, I can go ahead and give some sort of permission. Same thing at the group. I can give to anybody, right? These are the how you're allowing the interaction of an application to your company. Same thing with the admin consents. This is how you are allowing that application to come to you and get permissions. And over here, so over here, we are still under the enterprise application. To look at the permissions that you can assign directly as an administrator, we will have to go back to the enterprise applications. We go to app registrations. We were in the app demo. We go to API permissions. So these are the permissions I can give. So right now there is the user read, right? This was a permission that was given in the when you just click on and I consented as the admin user, and then I can select any other. For example, different APIs for Microsoft, my own APIs for PowerShell, and the ones that are already pre-built within other users. I can immediately grant an admin consent to it. And if I go, we also have the app roles. So I can create different app roles to assign permissions to user applications to interact with it, and roles and administrators. So this is when it starts touching down on the first factor, the fourth factor. The fourth factor is related to how is this all important, right? Because now I know that an application, let's say App Demo, can go ahead and be a cloud administrator. So it's going to have a high privilege. It can have a consent to all my users. It can write things in my domain, right? So these are all things that are going to interact in a risk management. And ultimately, when we're managing, it's how are we managing? So all this can be managed and authenticated. The service principals are going to be authenticated either by, as you could see, authentication keys, storage account keys, data encryption, certificates like PBX files, and passwords. Mainly, we recommend certificates over, but again, like anything can be a risk if you are not doing it in a safe manner. So if we're working with certificates, we would like to have it on keyboard. We would like to have the certificate protected. Now that we understand, just to recap, what's the service principal? Service principal tabs focusing in application tab. We know how they interact with Azure, and we know how important they are because they can have permissions, permissions on consenting users, consenting admins, and also roles, administrator roles in Azure. We're going to talk a little bit about the challenges. And for that, I want to pull a good document, this document that Microsoft has published. It's a fundamentals of security and service principles. If you've been following me, there was a video that I did about a service principle that was used for a privilege escalation. So one of the main things that we have here are these challenges. So far, we're talking about access reviews. So when I'm giving a consent, will that be reviewed in case of a privilege role? Then we already have main access reviews in the portal. The other permission service principles, right? we want to follow one of the three pillars of security, zero trust, which is basically just enough, right? You just have to enough roles or administrators. And thirdly, the fact that you can modify the credentials or authentication methods. That's what was done in that attack vector. The service principal password was changed. And what we talk a little bit about, this is how you can assess the service principal and ultimately the conditional access policy. So, right now, as of now, for having a conditional access policy based potentially on geolocation, let's say this application is hosted somewhere in Latin America, let's say it's in Brazil, it should not be expected in the United States. For having such of conditional access policies with the required additional licensement. Of course, this is the most granular, and as part of the pillars of zero trust, is being explicit. So that would be your best at the best security posture you can have. If not, you can implement part of what is already leveraged by Microsoft that doesn't involve any additional costs, as well as having a proper uh, administration and architecture once you are creating. So in the next video, we're going to be covering why you're going to be choosing a service principal over a managed identity and which will be best for the architecture you want to do. So thanks for watching. All the reference links will be in the description. Hope you have a beautiful day. Bye bye.